I'm Theo.
And I'm Juliet.
And this is Apologies Accepted.
We offer an entertaining look at some of the big issues in history by examining public apologies of the famous and infamous.
We're looking at politicians, serial killers, actors, and you.
Send us a public apology you would like to make, and we'll read it on the air and give you a chance to redeem yourself or just get some guilt off your shoulders.
We're here for you. Once a week, maybe more if you're really, really sorry. Hi, everybody.
This is Apologies Accepted,
the podcast.
And I'm not Theo.
I am not Juliet.
And today we're excited to be here to talk to you about a number of things, including what's shaking bacon.
What's shaking bacon? This week was a very quiet week for me, so happily nothing.
Nothing.
I've been not really. I mean, I did stuff, but not interesting. However, I was in a grocery store. Thanksgiving is coming up, and so I did some panic buying. Like, what if we run out of turkeys? I better buy one.
Yeah, I better buy 6 turkeys. That's what I did.
They're going to be gold by next Wednesday. And I was in the grocery store, and I saw half the people easily, including staff, not wearing masks. Maybe even 60% of people around me.
Yeah.
And I congratulated myself for not having that. I'm going to call it that instinctive response. It's not instinctive, but just that my initial response early on in the pandemic was, you need to be put to death for not wearing a mask. You need to die, and I need to be the one to get to kill you. Right? That's how I felt. I'm not feeling that way anymore. I don't feel like you deserve to die.
Well, yeah, the stakes are lower now that we have the vaccines and the boosters, I think. So it's a little bit less infuriating to see people not caring about other people.
Well, and I think I've just accepted that COVID now, COVID tomorrow, COVID forever. We're always going to have COVID.
Yeah.
We've got the pills. We've got the vaccines. Here we go. This is it, right?
Yep.
So, okay, cool. I'm accepting that. And fine, whatever. It works. But so I wrote down in my notes app, I no longer want to beat people to death. And then I saw family, and they weren't wearing masks, and their kids weren't wearing masks. And I got a little angry about that.
Yeah.
Right. Because children aren't vaccinated, or a lot of kids aren't vaccinated, and there's age restrictions and whatever. So when I see like a 3-year-old kid holding mommy's hand in the grocery store or whatever, not wearing a mask, I'm like, should you be thrown in jail for child abuse?
Yeah.
Like, really? And so then I wrote down child abuse, and then it occurred to me, so I was walking through the parking lot, if I got hit by a car and died on the scene, and the police came and found my phone, they would find a note that said, I don't want to beat people to death. Child abuse. And no one would be sad that I died, because what a horrible person.
Was that Trader Joe's?
No.
I'm always going to ask you that now. Anytime you mention going anywhere.
Oh, right. Because
what's his name brought it up in our interview.
Yes, right. It's true. So I loved... Everybody, here's another commercial for somebody who's not paying us. I love Trader Joe's. I essentially grew up with Trader Joe's, at least starting from the age of 19 when I moved to LA. And it's just always an amazing place for me because you could get really great stuff very cheap. And Friday night for $20, you could get cheese, bread, and wine and have people over.
Yep.
How adult, how sophisticated, how European. So I love Trader Joe's for that reason. And so when we moved to Texas, I moved here and I discovered there was no Trader Joe's.
Oh, wow.
The closest one was 8 hours away.
Holy shit.
And I called, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, I called Trader Joe's corporate office once a year for like 5 years in a row to ask them, when are you guys going to open up in Texas?
Wow. And then they did. So it was all due to you.
And then they did. And you're welcome, everybody. Well, me and the 3 million other Californians that all moved here. That
all moved to Austin. Yeah. For real. But that's great. That's funny. I'm glad you didn't die that day.
Or you would have had a great story to tell on a podcast, and that would have really boosted the ratings.
I wouldn't have a podcast without you. Who am I going to do this podcast with?
Oh, you'd find somebody. Hey, you.
Off the street.
Yeah.
Want to do a podcast, little boy?
Ooh, That just went places.
Speaking of little boys, we have a topic today.
We do, but yeah, what's shaking bacon? You have to tell me.
Bacon? I'm excited because we're recording this podcast on Friday instead of Sunday, as is our usual habit, because over the weekend I'm going to go down and be a tourist in San Francisco and hang out, stay in a hotel at Fisherman's Wharf, and just kind of wander around in the mornings and see what's shaking bacon in the early mornings at Fisherman's Wharf. It used to be, when I would do this, it was 20 years ago, and I used to go down and run along the wharf and the piers and stuff, and you would see fishermen like coming in with fish and setting up the stalls and shit like that. And I bet that's not the case anymore, but we'll see what's going on in the early mornings down at Fisherman's Wharf. I'll take my dog and I'll walk around and check out everything. And that's the big excitement of my weekend. So I'm really actually looking forward to that, taking some pictures and seeing the seals on Fisherman's Wharf, or the sea lions, or whatever the hell they are, and just checking out the tourists. It shouldn't be too crowded because it's November, so it's kind of cloudy and gray this weekend, so it's perfect weather for San Francisco.
That is really cool.
I think it should be fun. But that's really all that's going on. I was telling Theo before the podcast started that we had bought way too much food for Thanksgiving, so I'm sitting here in this kitchen overloaded with all kinds of crap that I'm never going to be able to eat, especially since we're going away for the weekend, so it's probably all going to go bad. But when I get back on Sunday, I'm going to make a sticky toffee bundt cake with bundt pan that Theo happily, graciously, and generously sent me. So I'm totally excited about that. I never would have bought myself a bundt pan, so you've made Thanksgiving possible, Theo.
Oh, because of the bundt pan.
Because of the bundt pan.
Well, we all know how important bundt cakes are to Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
They're the reason we have Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. So now let's talk about Thanksgiving and...
Well, yeah, and Charlie Brown. And
I love Charlie Brown. Peanuts is my favorite cartoon.
I liked it too growing up. After a certain point, I kind of fell off of it. And I think it's just because it was so wholesome that nothing happened.
The thing is that when it started out, for the first 20 or 30 years, it was really incisive and witty. And then after I guess Charles Schultz got older and, whatever, it just became kind of nothing happening, just a little wholesome and bullshit. So it wasn't as cool as it was early on. But I've got this one cartoon sitting in front of me right now, and it's got Peppermint Patty and Franklin. And Franklin, we're going to talk about a little bit more. He's a little boy, the first African-American character in the strip. But they're on a frozen over pond skating, and he's got a hockey stick in his hand. And she says, "All right, Franklin, what do you think you're doing?" And he goes, "Playing hockey. What does it look like?" And "It looks like you're in my way. That's what. I'm practicing for a figure skating competition." He goes, "What about me? I'm practicing to become a great hockey player." And she goes, "How many black players in the NHL, Franklin?"
Wow, hold on. Is that the whole comic? Does he come back with any witty? That's the joke?
That's it. She's like, "Come on, Franklin, get out of my way. You can't do this because you're black." And there's at that point, there was one black player in the NHL when that cartoon was written. So it's like an incisive comment about racism in the NHL.
Lack of diversity. Yeah,
really,
okay.
Yeah.
Or racism, or how racists want to be figure skaters.
Racists want to be figure skaters. But it used to be more like that than what it became later with Charlie Brown Christmas, which was I like Charlie Brown Christmas and I love it. I watch it every year.
It's sweet. Yeah,
but
it's sweet.
But it's nothing but sweet. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. And wow, how funny that your retelling of that Peppermint Patty NHL strip made me rethink my position on this controversy we're going to talk about in the apology from Gene Schultz for racism in a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. Because I was like, oh, that feels a little racist there. But okay, you extended the thinking for me.
Okay, good. Yeah. So Franklin was introduced. Yeah, Franklin was introduced to Peanuts in July of 1968, which is before we had what's Bill Cosby's cartoon, Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. That was 1974. So this was before that. I think this was really one of the first African-American characters that weren't racist caricatures in comics. There were...
Well, certainly in a mainstream comic.
In a mainstream comic, yeah. There was, I think the Jackson 5 had a comic strip or an animated show, but that's kind of different.
Well, what I can say as a time marker, there's a very famous episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood,
right,
where so he puts his feet in a wading pool tub, kiddie pool, and the mailman comes by, and it's a hot day, and I was going to say Mr. Bill, and it's not Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill says, "Hey, come on!" No,
and the mailman is African American,
right? And Mr. Rogers invites the mailman to enjoy the pool with him, in a non-sexual way, and. Oh, I said it, and I think it's so funny.
It is funny.
And dumb. But he invites the mailman to come and cool off and stick his feet in the pool. And the mailman's like, "Yeah, I've been walking around all day. Great, I'll do that." And of course, the mailman is African American or black.
Yeah.
And the shock at the time was they were both sharing the same water on TV. And
swimming pools and stuff were segregated mostly at the time. If they weren't segregated by law, they were segregated de facto. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was, it was a nice way for a children's show to introduce children to the concept of equality. See, we're sharing the same water and nothing happened. I actually invited this person to come join me, and this person graciously accepted, blah, 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 right? So, big event in children's
Possibly
TV.
A big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Which sounds so weird today.
And I don't think it was big for the kids as much as it was for the parents, right?
Well, right. It's only big for kids are fine with whatever, right?
Yeah.
If you told a kid, "Today's the day we have to paint ourselves green and walk backwards down the street and sing hippity hoo," they would do it. As my grandnephew is about to find out.
Grandnephew?
Yeah, my niece had a baby, and so...
She did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, anyway, we'll talk about that later.
What's shaking, bacon?
Congratulations.
My 5-year-old niece had a baby.
That's physically impossible.
Apparently she's pretending to be 30 now.
She must be older than I remember. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Okay, I derailed you, so...
So do we want to talk about peanuts or do we want to talk about Thanksgiving first? Because it is Thanksgiving week.
It is Thanksgiving week. We will have some people who are driving to their families and looking for an escape from knowing what's about to come to them. Thanksgiving with the family.
I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be great. Everyone will be happy. No one will get messily drunk. No one's going to commit
right
any
here
crimes.
Would be the first. I'd show up drunk.
Right? Totally.
I'm here. Yeah, but I mean, the political landscape is much better. So yay. Anyway, let's talk about what is Thanksgiving, because this episode there are charges leveled against a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving for a racist moment in the show.
Potentially,
yeah. And so, which is really what we're going to examine. But, to say racism and Thanksgiving, what a weird mix. Not at all. It's a tradition that goes back hundreds of years.
To the beginning of Thanksgiving, yes.
I almost said thousands of years, but that's literally impossible. Okay, so the history of Thanksgiving. Let's learn some cool stuff.
Oh, cool.
Let's see if you learned some cool stuff.
Maybe I will.
Lie and just say how cool.
How cool. And I'm already impressed.
My feelings won't be hurt at all then. Okay, great. So starting back in September of 1620, 102 religious separatists and land speculators left Plymouth, England, and 66 days later made landfall near Cape Cod. And a month later, they sailed across the Massachusetts Bay to begin a new colony at Plymouth, Massachusetts, thus committing the first crime in American history, a lack of creativity. They left Plymouth, England, and they landed in Plymouth, America.
Right.
Guys, literally, you could have called it Tree, and it would have been more
original. What struck me in your story so far is that not only are these religious people, but land speculators?
Sure, yep. People that were going to come over
take the land from the Indians and make money off of it.
Well, I mean, did they know that the Indians were there? Sure, maybe. But at the same time, whatever, the Indians didn't have a concept of land ownership.
Well, that's what they say. That's what they say. But I mean,
That's what white people say?
That's what the white people say. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know.
Well, they had territories, right? But I mean, whatever, because already I'm in an area that I can't speak to because
we don't know.
I don't know. I've studied Native American history in one semester at university, and it was taught to us by a white man who studies Native Americans. So, what do I know, right?
Right.
Enough to get in trouble is what I know. All right, cool. So they land in about November. They hit the U.S., and then they start establishing their colony in December of 1620. And of course, we're in the midst of the mini ice age there. So it's not only bitterly cold in a northern climate, it's deadly cold. So the colonists stay on the ship and they suffer scurvy and disease, and half of them die. So you're left with about 50 people, right?
Oh my God.
Who've gone through a brutal winter. Oh. And in March of 1621, they get off of the ship and they start building little houses or whatever.
Right.
And a Native American comes out of the woods and greets them in English.
What?
I know. And if I saw that in a movie, I'd be like, lazy writing. This is
totally
dumb.
This is God writing lazy stuff again.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is God writing lazy stuff because the Native American who came out of the woods and greeted the English people in English, emphasis on greeted. He didn't have a conversation with them in English.
Right. He was just like, hey, man.
Had a expression he could use that they understood as a greeting, right? So I don't know his name because I wasn't there and Wikipedia didn't tell me, but he learned this English from a name that you're going to recognize, Squanto.
I knew it was going to be Squanto.
I forgot all about Squanto, whose real name is Tisquantum, and I can understand why they went with Squanto. Okay, so I'm going to call him Tisquantum, even though...
Respectful.
Yeah, I'm going to be respectful, even though Squanto is easier for me to say. All right, so Tisquantum was a member of the Pawtucket tribe. Of course, I've mispronounced that terribly. And he was kidnapped by an English sea captain and sold into slavery in Spain in 1614, or around 1614 for our history nerds out there. He was sold to Christian monks who educated him in religion and how to be European. He escaped and he got to London and he returned. Potentially, maybe he met Pocahontas because she was in London in 1617, 1618, and he may have been in London around the same time.
Interesting.
Maybe. I don't know. That's not documented, but potentially, probably, maybe.
It's possible.
Maybe they had a love child who ascended to the throne of England. Okay, no. And so he escapes to London, and then he gets back to America.
Amazing.
From England on a boat. Because he knows how to make money in America.
Right.
And so, hey, you want to set up colony? You want to grab some land? You want to know where the gold is? I know. I speak the language. I'm from there, right? Mm-hmm. So he gets back to America only to discover that his entire village had been wiped out by an infectious disease. And so through the weirdness of luck, bad luck, right? He gets kidnapped. He learns English. He gets back to America only to discover that his entire village has been wiped out. Had he stayed, he would have died. And he joins another tribe, the Wampanoag. And so it's the Wampanoag that help the Pilgrims that first year, right? The Wampanoag are like, yeah, we saw you in your big boat and we saw you guys starving to death and we wondered, what was up, but not our business. And so the Indian that had stepped out of the woods had learned some English from Tisquantum, and Tisquantum was brought to the village and met the Pilgrims and showed them what foods to plant and how to grow these specific crops here in this country and what things to avoid and what you can eat.
It's really nice of them.
Cool. Very nice of him, right? And In November of that same year, so what, 6, 7, 8 months after March? It's 11. Yeah, I got into math there. Sorry, everybody. So they get off the boat in March, and 8 months later, they are celebrating, and they decide to have a day, a feast to show their appreciation to the Lord. They probably didn't call it Thanksgiving, but these types of food ceremonies were common enough. You know, we're going to give thanks to God, and we're either going to fast and not eat, or we're going to, and yeah, exactly. It's going to A or B.
Right.
So cool. So they have a big feast that lasts for 3 days, and a pilgrim chronicler named Edward Winslow wrote a paragraph about the 3-day feast. And all we know is they ate deer. There's a lot of speculation about they ate swan and they ate bear and they ate, but we know they had some deer, right?
All right.
Cool. And so off and on throughout American history, the colonists would hold feast days, right, or fasting days to give up to the Lord appreciation for having helped them. So 1621 is the first Thanksgiving. Nothing in 1622, and then in 1623, oh, dude, what's your name? Your Governor Winslow, yes. No, Governor William Bradford, sorry. In 1623, Governor William Bradford says, hey, let's have another day of thanks because we just had a drought and it's over. So God has sent us tons of rain, and let's not eat anything. Which, if you think about it, they have had a drought. Crops have suffered. So it makes sense, rather than eat everything, not to eat anything. So day of fasting. Cool. All right. So then we've got off and on through American history, different colonies holding days of thanks. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress designated a couple of days as a Thanksgiving day throughout a year. That grammatically doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's just to say that the U.S. government, the Continental government, decided, hey, let's have a day of appreciation for X, Y, or Z. In 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation for the entire nation, and it called upon Americans to express their gratitude for the happy conclusion to the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. So therein we see this nice little blend of, or this move, let's call it a move, of Thanksgiving days of appreciation, going from religious festivities where we're thanking God to something that becomes political.
Gotcha.
Right? We're thanking for the end of the war and for the birth of our nation and our government, right?
Yeah.
We're thanking God for that, but it's getting political. All right, cool. So from 1789, there are a couple of other presidents that follow Washington who also hold Thanksgiving days, right? Nationally decreed. You had Thanksgiving pockets happening regionally throughout different times of the year where different states would hold Thanksgiving, whatever, Wednesday in July. I don't know. I'm making that up, right? But there was no uniformity to it. In 1817, New York became the first of several states to officially adopt an annual Thanksgiving holiday. In 1827, the noted magazine, you can tell I'm reading, the noted magazine editor and prolific writer Sarah Josepha Hale, who's the author of the nursery rhyme Mary Had a Little Lamb, a ton of other things. She was an editor for Goody's Lady Journal, which became the leading periodical, which taught domesticity to women, right? How to sew, what to cook, what's expected of a woman. But also she was very pro-female education. I mean, she was a feminist for the day, right? It probably would be the best way to describe her. So you got to be married, you got to have kids, but you should be able to read.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
You have to read to your children.
Yeah.
Okay, so she launched a campaign to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday, again, starting in 1827. So in her magazine, she would plant little stories about Thanksgiving traditions. And for 36 years, she wrote letters to governors, to presidents.
Jesus.
Yep.
Dedicated.
Not
That's
to
like
Jesus.
you trying to get a Trader Joe's.
Well, I did it, and she did it. She's known as the mother of Thanksgiving. I've never heard of her.
No.
You need a better press agent.
Should write to someone about that.
I should become her press agent. Sarah Josepha Hale, I love that middle name. Eventually convinced Abraham Lincoln to declare a national holiday.
Go,
and
girl.
he did this in 1863 at the height of the Civil War. He issued a proclamation entreating all Americans to ask God, a little back to religion here, to condemn to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife, and to heal the wounds of the nation. And he scheduled Thanksgiving for the final Thursday in November. This would now be an annual event starting in 1827, thanks to the efforts of one Sarah Josepha Hale, the mother of Thanksgiving. And so Thanksgiving was celebrated from 1863 onwards for 76 years on the last Thursday of November. Right? And we kind of all loosely know this who are Gen X because it's the thing we were taught in American history. And then in 1939, Franklin
Delano.
Hi, and there's a nice bridge to our topic. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I know, right? Look how smart I am. Moved the holiday up 1 week. So it was going to be not the last Thursday, but before the last Thursday, which isn't confusing at all, in an attempt to retail sales. He wanted to increase retail sales because the economy had burst during the Great Depression. Roosevelt's plan became known as Franksgiving, and people were not happy with it. They thought he was an asshole, right? And there was passionate opposition, which is so weird because
God, really, who cares?
Well, one, I mean, yeah, who cares? And then two, if you tried to move it back, all those people that were bitching before about
just
they'd
as
be
mad.
bitching. Yes, right. So bitches are going to bitch. I made that saying up just now. All right, cool. And so starting in 1941, it moved to I call it the fourth Thursday, but before the last Thursday. And that was all done in an effort to help retailers prepare for Christmas.
I did not know that. That is an interesting story.
Well, thank you. Yes, how cool. You were welcome. These last 15 minutes were not spent in vain.
Absolutely not. From landlords moving over to America to take advantage of the poor Indian people to saving money making money for retail.
Listen, I don't know. Apparently, no one's told you.
We are a capitalist society from the beginning.
This whole life is nothing but about money.
Seems to be the case, man.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's not get unhappy. Let's get happy and talk about the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special and this controversy.
Yes. So the Charlie
unhappy.
Brown Thanksgiving special, let me see. Let me go through. I've got it right here. Don't panic, anyone.
I'm not delaying at all or stalling for time, not one bit. I was so fascinated by Theo's rendition of American Thanksgiving history.
I completely lost track of everything. So the animated special of Charlie Brown Thanksgiving came out in 1973, and there's some controversy recently over this special because one scene, a sequence of the special shows Franklin, who we'll talk about in more detail in a minute, shows him sitting on one side of the table all by himself. So Franklin, as I mentioned earlier, is a little boy in the comic strip Peanuts, and he showed up for the first time in Peanuts in 1968. He's the first African-American character in the strip. And according to Peanuts.com, he plays baseball. He's learning guitar. He's a member of a swim club in 4-H. He's supportive and smart and always willing to lend a hand. He enjoys spending time. I love this part. He enjoys spending time with his grandparents and learning about the old days from them. And me, as a person of grandparent age, practically, thinking about telling a kid about the old days cracks me up. Because what we talk about new age music, new wave music.
New age music.
New age music. That too. That's part of the old days.
Crystals and chime to make calm.
It's back when I was a kid, we wore a lot of bright colors, Franklin. Anyway, so even though he thinks Charlie Brown's friends are a little weird, he's happy to be part of the gang. He goes to school with Peppermint Patty and Marcy, but visits Charlie Brown in a nearby neighborhood. So he first showed up, as I said, in 1968. He met Charlie Brown at the beach, and his introduction was part of a 5-day series in which Sally, who's Charlie Brown's little sister, threw Charlie Brown's beach ball into the ocean, and Franklin went to get it for him. So American public beaches were not legally segregated at this time, but were segregated. In fact, basically a lot of sort of like now, I guess you don't see, if in certain neighborhoods you see mostly white people, certain neighborhoods you see mostly, people from Russia. Are they white people? I don't know. I'm going to get myself
Slavic.
in trouble. Slavic people.
I lived in a Russian Jewish neighborhood in West Hollywood. I'm very comfortable talking about the Russian population. It's vast and diverse.
I'll leave it to you. Thank you. So anyway, public beaches were de facto segregated at the time. So this caused some consternation. And Franklin later even visited Charlie Brown's house and as I mentioned, found some of Charlie Brown's friends to be weird, which is, legitimate. And then he last appeared in 1999, which is the year before Charles Schulz died, sadly. But there may never have been a Franklin if it weren't for a LA school teacher named Harriet Glickman, who wrote to Schulz in April 1968, which was 11 days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and she urged him to introduce a black character into Peanuts. So obviously, racial tension was high. There were riots and desegregation in schools, and the assassination of Dr. King included. Schulz wrote back saying that he had thought about it, but he didn't want to appear to be patronizing. He said, "I would be very happy to try, but I am sure that I would receive the sort of criticism that would make it appear as if I were doing this in a condescending manner." But then one of Glickman's friends got enlisted to write to Schulz too, and he wrote saying, "The introduction of a black character would, quote, ease my problem of having my kids seeing themselves pictured in the overall American scene. Secondly, it would suggest racial amity in a casual day-to-day sense. You mentioned a fear of being patronizing. Though I doubt that any Negro would view your efforts that way, I'd like to suggest that an accusation of being patronizing would be a small price to pay for the positive results that would accrue." And there I use the word Negro, which is kind of off the table these days. That's the word that was used at the time as the respectful term. Or so it was considered, but not anymore. I maybe should have not said it. I don't know. I'm not quite clear on what the right thing to do.
I mean, I'm going to say it's okay, but it's not my place to say it's okay. I will say it's a word I don't take. It's not even my thing to take offense. When other people say it, nobody ever says it, right? So I can't even say when other people say it.
Right.
When I trip over it, when I read it, it all depends on context.
Okay.
Right? So somebody in the 21st century uses that word, they mean it in a derogatory fashion.
Right. Like if I were using it to refer to somebody in my day-to-day life, that would probably be a big fat no-no.
I'd fall down in fucking shock if you did something like that. What? But then you have the United Negro College Fund.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
And then we also have NAACP, the National Association of Colored People. And so these are terminologies. These are words that were used at a time in polite society to talk about various other people of color.
Right.
And so I think
I apologize for any offense, but no offense was intended. And if anyone would like to write and tell me that I should never say that word in any context, again, I will take that to heart.
But, also have a real reason behind writing in to say that. Just don't do it because you're like, fuck them.
I open the door.
Yeah. Because that's what I would do. I'd be like, you don't say that word.
Okay.
I have power over somebody's life.
Sure. So in an interview with Charles Schulz in 1988, he said, "I finally put Franklin in, and there was one strip where Charlie Brown and Franklin had been playing on the beach, and Franklin said, 'Well, it's been nice being with you. Come on over to my house sometime.' Some people didn't like that. Another editor protested once when Franklin was sitting in the same row of school desks with Peppermint Patty and said, 'We have enough trouble here in the South without you showing the kids together in school.' But I never paid any attention to those things."
I can believe that. I cannot believe that.
You think in 1968 people would be over it, but apparently not. Charles Schulz said, "I never paid attention to those things, and I remember telling Larry at the time about Franklin. He wanted me to change it, and we talked about it for a long while on the phone, and I finally sighed and said, 'Well, Larry, let's put it this way. Either you print it just the way I draw it or I quit. How's that?' So that's the way it ended."
Great.
Fantastic.
That's exactly how you handle those things.
Yeah. I should try that at work.
Well, if somebody's pushing racism on you, yes, you should.
Yeah, then I will, for sure.
Right. But if it's get to your desk on time, that's another thing.
I quit. I can't work under these conditions. All right. In a later conversation with Harriet Glickman, she said, my parents were very concerned about others. And I'm reading this because I like what she has to say, and I'm contrasting it with what you might hear today. Maybe the circles that I travel in are negative, but I don't hear a lot of this kind of conversation today. I don't know. So anyway, she said, my parents were very concerned about others and the values that they instilled in us about caring for and appreciating everyone of all colors and backgrounds. This is what we knew when we were growing up, that you cared about other people. And so during the years, we were very aware of the issues of racism and civil rights in this country. And remember, when I was young, Black people had to sit at the back of the bus. Black people couldn't sit in the same seats in the restaurants that you could sit. The period before I wrote the letter was the major period of civil rights activities. Every day I would see or read about Black children trying to get into school and seeing crowds of white people standing around spitting at them or yelling at them, and the beatings and the dogs and the hosings and the courage of so many people in that time. I just like what she says about her parents trying to instill this value of equality in the kids growing up. I think that's really sweet, and that's really important. I'd like to hear more of it. So get on that, Theo.
I am working on that right now with this podcast. You're welcome. Yeah, I read that same thing, and I liked her further explanation about what prompted her to write into Schultz.
What do you mean?
Oh, well, so
Tell
where
us.
she said, I will tell you. So in that same interview, she says, it wasn't as if one day I said, oh, things are bad and Martin Luther King was shot and I should do something. It was the accumulation of all the years of seeing the discrimination, the segregation, the hatred and all. And I just thought maybe I'll do something. And I realized that Peanuts was the most beloved comic strip in the country. And I wrote not only to Schultz, but I also wrote to a few other cartoonists as well. And so, yeah. And I liked that it was, oh, hey, my whole life I've been aware of racism, and this one event was sort of I don't want to say the last straw, but showed me that like, oh wow, this is only ever going to get worse if we don't do something about it.
It makes me think that maybe one person can change things, or at least could in 1968. And maybe now you can't write to a cartoonist and have them even read your letter or find your letter among all the letters that they get. But I mean, maybe it is possible for one person to make a difference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do think so. Right. But I guess maybe the avenues are different today.
Yeah.
Given that everybody can have a YouTube channel and any one person can, become the loudest voice in the country. All you have to do is just say something that's shitty enough.
Yeah, or do a little dance.
Maybe.
So back to the Thanksgiving special.
Yes.
1973 animated special of Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. Franklin is sitting on one side of the table by himself in a lawn chair, and the other kids are sitting on the other sides of the table in various chairs of various descriptions, and they're eating toast and jelly beans and popcorn. And it's pretty obvious that they just put this thing together ad hoc with the materials they had available. So, but Darnell Hunt says he's the Dean of Social Sciences and Professor of Sociology and African American Studies at UCLA. And he said to Yahoo Life, having Franklin on this long side by himself, you could interpret it that no one wanted to sit next to him. Hunt, who remembers feeling included in ways I hadn't before when he first saw Franklin in a Peanuts comic strip, says that Schultz probably thought he was doing a good thing by including the character at all. But Hunt said it's a classic example of what can be missed even when you're trying to be inclusive. Today, this would not be acceptable, says Hunt. It really does speak to the need for more inclusive creators and storytellers behind the scenes who produce these images. He adds, that's why it's so important to have people in the writers' rooms and in production who might be more sensitive to these issues.
I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's absolutely not wrong. Darren Bell, who won a Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartooning, said that a lot of cartoons are like Rorschach tests in which people have their own interpretations of certain scenes. When I saw that image of Franklin, my first thought was Charles Schultz really wanted Franklin to be seen, and Franklin was really important. He added that Peanuts was a kind and inclusive comic strip. And these are the folks who were on a panel?
Yeah. So the Charles M. Schultz Museum held a panel for Black cartoonists, and within that discussion, they didn't really address, but they talked about the the charges of
Thanksgiving.
racism. Yeah.
Yeah.
In that scene, right? And one of the cartoonists, Rob Armstrong, said very clearly, listen, I know that Charles M. Schulz was by no means a racist, and here's my experience with him.
Yep.
And I told you when I was researching this, there were two things that made me cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to do it now. It was Armstrong's recounting of meeting Charles Schulz. So when Armstrong's comic got picked up, and I'm so sorry, I know it's Jump. Thank you. I was trying to call it Jump Street, and it's like, it's not Jump Street. That's a TV show.
Yeah.
So when Jumpstart got picked up by United Syndicate,
sure.
He asked the editor, hey, I'd like to meet Charles Schulz. And the editor was like, yeah, you and everybody else, so no. Right? Aww. But send him a strip. And so Armstrong sent him a strip, a published strip is what I'm trying to say. He didn't draw something special for Schulz. And in that, one of his figures is in the shower singing a popular song, Hang On Sloopy, but instead of the word Sloopy, she uses Snoopy, and that's referencing Peanuts and how cute, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a strip that Armstrong sends to Schulz. And then a year and a half later, Armstrong gets invited to Charles Schulz's studio and gets to meet Charles Schulz. And when he walks into the studio, he sees that his drawing that he sent was framed over Schulz's desk.
Wow.
Right? And it was this discussion that they had, and they were friends for like 20, 30 years, where Schulz was like, yeah, I really can't draw a black person's experience. I can't write a black person's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'm aware that anything I do is going to be an issue, but I'm honored to have inspired a black child who wanted to be a cartoonist. When Armstrong was 3, he told his mother that he wanted to be a cartoonist and grew up to become a cartoonist. And it was the representation of Franklin in Peanuts that showed Armstrong that he could grow up to become a cartoonist. Right?
Wow.
Because look, there's a black little boy in a cartoon.
Right.
And I want to draw cartoons. I can do this. And then he does. And then he gets to meet his hero. And then he walks into that hero's office and he finds him drawing, and he did.
And not only that, but Franklin's last name was made to be Armstrong in a later television show or television, what do you call it, special?
A show. You can call it a show. A TV show. It's perfectly appropriate.
So yeah, they named Franklin after, Charles Schulz named Franklin after Rob Armstrong, which is super sweet.
It's super sweet. That did not make me cry. But the picture over the desk totally made me cry.
That made you cry. Oh,
and the rest of the special can only be about what makes me cry.
Okay. So, interestingly, in 1972, before the Thanksgiving special, Franklin was seated at a dinner table on the same side as his friends in Snoopy Come Home. So, I think that leads us to the apology, which is not really an apology, but the comments from Jean Schulz, who is the widow of the late Charles Schulz. She issued a statement on the whole Thanksgiving Franklin matter, saying the scene would have had nothing to do with Sparky, which is a nickname for Charles Schulz, because it was purely the animators and the directors working on it. The director parcels out the scenes to the animators, and the animators who drew that scene aren't alive anymore, or we don't know how to find them. The controversy first popped up a couple of years ago. I probably watched the special a dozen times, and I hadn't noticed it, but I wouldn't notice it. It's to be noticed now. In a blog post previously published on the Charles M. Schulz Museum and Research Center website, Jean offered a little more context to what likely happened back in the 70s, writing, while it can't be known now which animator drew that particular scene, you could be sure there was no ulterior motive. I fall back on Peppermint Patty's apology to Charlie Brown, explaining she meant no harm when she criticized his poor Thanksgiving offering, which goes something like, there are enough problems in the world already without these misunderstandings. To suggest this show had any other messages than the importance of family, sharing, and gratitude is to look for an issue where there is none. Now, I kind of don't like that so much because it's just like saying, well, maybe you're offended by it, but you shouldn't be, which is a common response to racism.
Yeah.
But.
Well, right. That's it exactly. So I I liked a lot of what she had to say, particularly the acknowledgement that, hey, this concern about Franklin sitting on the other side of the table alone isn't something that I ever noticed, nor would I have ever noticed it. But it is to be noticed now.
Exactly.
Right?
That was
and
perfect.
I think that is perfect. And if she had stopped there, I'd be like, wow, you're really progressive. That's great. And yes, and you're right, right? Because it hits the real issue, which is sometimes we are inadvertently racist.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And another person
a lot of times
can look at something and say, I mean, Rob Armstrong who again was the little black boy who grew up to become a black animator, said during the panel that the scene where Franklin's seated at the table on the other side, away from all the other characters, is exactly how he feels every day.
Right.
Right.
So sad. That's going to make me cry.
Well, oh, you cry too?
I'm going to cry.
We're going to have to stop doing this show. So many people are like, please. So, yeah, in a way, it actually does speak to how people of color feel in this country.
Yeah.
Included but excluded.
Oh, so sad.
Yeah. I mean, and fair enough. I mean, the way anybody feels about anything, everyone's entitled to have their feelings. It's not for me to say somebody shouldn't feel that way. But then, it's sort of the territory that Jean's moving into when she says, well, that wasn't the intention of the show. And anybody that comes
there's no problem. Right.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe not quite. Yes, you could extend her argument to that point and pull it into that territory. I'd like to keep it in that nice marshmallow middle ground of, she's a nice older lady. She gets it. She doesn't understand it emotionally, but she understands that other people are upset and that they have reason to be, and that there are experiences that she nor her husband could have ever related to. And therefore, I don't want to say they didn't try, but they didn't pretend that they could. That's a better way of putting it forward. Yeah. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
So let's rate the apology.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I think personally, I think there should be no rating because it's not an apology. And even if it were an apology, it would not be for two white people to accept it or decline it.
Well, right. But I mean, we could rate it. I mean, we can rate what another white person does.
That's true. You're right. We can.
Yeah, we can. I give us permission to do that. And so on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being, the Michael Chabon of apologies. Right.
Boo.
Boo. And the 1 being not. It's tough. You would think I would have actually thought about the number that I would have given it.
It's really not an apology. So I don't know if we can rate it as an apology because she didn't say, I'm sorry. She's like, it was kind of not intended to be.
So as an apology, because she does technically use the word apology when she says, I might mirror Peppermint Patty's apology, right?
That's true.
And so that's a bit dismissive. But on the other hand, is it? I don't know, right?
Right.
Because Peppermint Patty, it's just the whole wholesomeness of Charlie Brown of Peanuts, right? Mm-hmm. And Gene Schultz is somebody from that world of wholesomeness. Whether there's inadvertent racism or not, it's another thing. But she, so God, I don't know. It's a 4.
You should really read more early Peanuts because they were really fucking funny. But
I'll say I will because I always say
that's what we do on this podcast.
I'll
totally do that.
And then I get up and I say, I have nothing to do. So
if I'm going to rate this apology, I'll give it a 6.
Okay, I gave it a 4, so we're both dancing around a 5, so that's a 5, right?
Fair enough, it's a 5.
4 plus 6, yeah. So it's a middle ground one. She acknowledges that some people have real feelings around this issue, and does the kind of It's not quite a "I'm sorry you feel this way" apology, but it sort of is. I'm sorry that you feel this way. We didn't mean for you to feel this way. And so, yeah, it's not a stellar apology. But for me, what was stellar was her acknowledgement that it wasn't an issue that was on her radar, but she recognizes that it's on the radar now.
Got it. Okay, fair enough.
So not a total discounting, but, also not a total affirmation.
I think that's fair. And I think we should talk about who's sorry now.
Oh, well, actually, I have to tell you the other thing that made me cry.
Oh, yeah.
And that give you a little bit of a deep dive into some of their racism in Charlie Brown's production crew.
Yeah.
So Gene Schultz is talking about here's what my husband did, and here's his idea behind this thing or that thing, right? And she talks about how Charles Schultz has Franklin and Charlie Brown meet on the beach, right? They don't meet like, "Oh, I just moved in across the street from you."
Right.
How challenging would that have been? Charlie Brown lives in a neighborhood where a black person moved in. Oh my God, shut down the country, right? So the beach is neutral territory. Even though there were laws, and as to your point, there's de facto segregation, even if there wasn't a law. Okay, so she says, speaking as her husband, "I want to do this. How on earth do I do it in a way that's natural? The easy thing would have been to have Franklin be a new kid who moves to town and lives across the street, but instead he had them meet in a very neutral place, and then it's revealed that he goes to Peppermint Patty's school across town. I wish he was here now because it never occurred to me to ask him how he hit on that idea. I always say that in all the years I was married to Sparky, it seemed like he created the strip so effortlessly. It's my penance now to study all the things I took for granted then." Heartbreaking.
That's sweet.
Heartbreaking. Yeah, so I'm going to boost my 4 up to a 5 and maybe a 6. Because I feel bad for her.
I wonder if she's still alive. I think she is.
She was alive up until a few years ago, which doesn't answer your question. But somehow she was alive in 2019. That sort of counts as now.
The museum is up in Sonoma. I should go there and check it out.
I hate you. You should.
If I were smart, I would have done that before this episode.
No, that's where you lie.
But I'm not smart. And so, yeah, I did. I totally
went there.
It was fantastic.
All right. So I just wanted to see, hey, okay, were any of these guys sort of maybe Klan people or racist somehow, right?
Yikes.
So Charles Schultz, of course not.
Good.
We know, not intentionally racist. Done. Solved. Lee Mendelsohn was a producer who worked with Charles Schultz on a number of the iconic Peanuts cartoons, including the Christmas Carol one.
Yeah.
Lee Mendelsohn, who was Jewish, died on Christmas Day in 2019.
Oh.
Yeah. And so how did he get involved with Charles Schultz and Peanuts? He did a documentary on Willie Mays, who was an African-American baseball player and was considered the best baseball player of all time back in I think it was the 60s he did that, but I don't hold me to the decade. So he did a documentary on Willie Mays, and then he was like, I did one on the best baseball player. Why don't I do one on the worst baseball player, Charlie Brown? And so he approached Charles Schultz and was like, I'd like to do a documentary, and they ended up working together. So Lee Mendelsohn is the person who brought in Vince Guaraldi, whose music for Charlie Brown Christmas is my favorite Christmas music.
Mine too. It's so good.
It's the best. It's the best. I can listen to it
over and over.
Merry Christmas to you, my little angel.
Merry Christmas.
All right, let's see here. So, And then when they couldn't find any satisfying lyrics for Guaraldi's lovely instrumental piece, Christmas Time Is Here, Mendelsohn wrote the lyrics to that song. Christmas time is... He didn't sing it, though. The role producer is often imagined to be the money guy who brings the funds and the talent to make the project work, but Mendelsohn was much more than that. He and Schultz brainstormed about the idea for Charlie Brown Christmas together. Mendelsohn had read a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, The Fir Tree, and that gave Schultz the idea to come up with idea of a central, what's this episode about? Oh, it's about Charlie Brown finds a broken Christmas tree, right? And what's the true meaning of Christmas? So cool, right? Lovely. And I'm going to say Lee Mendelsohn,
Good guy.
probably not a racist. That's not to say that Jewish people can't be racist.
Of course.
I know some problems or some words, but, probably not an overt racist, right? And then head animator Bill Melendez, and this is where I'm going to screw up, and because their last names are so similar to me, Mendelsohn and Melendez, but he was Bill Melendez, who was the head animator, was born in Hermosillo in Mexico, and walked across the border with his mother as a child in 1920 to America.
Wow.
And became an American citizen officially when he signed up for the military.
Wow.
They gave him a citizenship then, right?
I wish they did that now. But anyway.
Well, I think they do but okay, I don't know. Clearly, because I said, I think they do, and you shook your head no, and I was like, okay.
I don't think so.
I don't know, but we'll
I bet you $20 they don't.
There's no way to ever know.
There's no way to ever know.
No. All right, cool. And so Melendez, who was an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, grew up to become a cartoonist, started off with Disney, as most of the animators did at a certain point in early American cartoon history. And let's see here. Yeah, okay. So he worked on a bunch of cartoons, Fantasia, Bambi, Pinocchio. He ended up working with Charles Schulz on Peanuts cartoons, and his name was not Bill, but the Disney cartoonist gave him that name because his real name was too long. So here's somebody who actually, at the hands of white people, suffered inadvertent racism.
Yeah.
Right? Your name's too funny. Well, they didn't say it was funny, but they said it was too long.
Your name's too weird. We're going to call you Bill.
We're going to call you Bill. And that's the name he went by. And so that was kind of the end of that.
Yeah.
But I will say that on Twitter, which of course is where this controversy rages, as all controversies in American culture do, without Twitter, we would never know what to be angry about. There's a woman named Kimberly Manning, who is a medical doctor, and she shared a clip of the Peanuts. What word am I looking for? Where Franklin's sitting by himself. She shared.
Oh, yeah, the sequence.
A still. Thank you. Yes.
A still.
And she says, this unedited image is from a 1973 cartoon that I watched every single Thanksgiving as a kid. Seeing Franklin at that table was a big deal to us.
Yeah.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
And then she says, dang, diversity without equality and inclusion is a sad, subtle thing, isn't it? Then and now. She goes on, right? Mm-hmm. So very valid point. I think that sums up the whole issue beautifully. I think it explains both sides of the equation beautifully. And then she says, I believe the entire body of work around the character Franklin, added in 1968 by Charles Schulz, creator of Peanuts, was forward-thinking and brave. This isn't a dig at his legacy or intentions. But regardless of the many interpretations of why Franklin sat alone, he did. And then, I dove into her Twitter comments, because how do you not when you see something that's that's really reasonable.
Yeah.
And this is the way I feel. Here's why, but I understand, right? It's everything. She's got it all down in a tweet. So smart. She should have a podcast. And so the very scientific survey that I conducted by looking at 2 comments in her feed, right? Where people had, and surprise, white people had that knee-jerk reaction of, this is ridiculous.
Right.
There's no need to be upset about it. It's a cartoon. However you might want to put that, right? I went and looked on their feeds. Yeah, racist. If not racist, at least white supremacist, because some of the stuff they liked, I was like, yeah. So, right. Like on one hand, I could say, yeah, it feels kind of ridiculous to say, oh, this is racist. But then if I think about it for 2 seconds, it's like, you know what? It wouldn't have occurred to me that it's racist, but I can absolutely see why somebody feels that way. And looking at it, yeah, I can agree. Sure. There's something going on there that the people at the time didn't recognize. They thought they were doing good. right? At least you're invited to the party.
Right.
Right. So, yeah. And then I looked into the episode last night with 21st Century Eyes, and I am not diminishing charges of racism, but I do want to say that I can project myself 50 years into the future, and here's some other things that are going to be problematic with this.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So we have the misgendering of Peppermint Patty by Marcy, who calls Peppermint Patty Sir.
Yeah.
A lot, right? So is that homophobia? Is it transphobia? Don't know, right? We have sexual harassment, where Peppermint Patty is after Charlie Brown and forces herself upon him.
Right.
Right? He doesn't want her. She called him up and says, hey, I'm coming to your house for Thanksgiving. And she flirts with him. And we could even say stalk. It's a lot of harassment.
Yeah.
There's misogyny in the form of humor that Peppermint Patty is reversing gender roles. So it's funny because it's a woman who's chasing a man. So that makes it funny. So that's misogyny, in my opinion. There's bestiality because we have the animals who cook the dinner.
What?
I literally can't breathe now. Snoopy serves. He's got to wear an outfit.
I'm crying.
And then, thank you. When I thought of that, I ran back here to type that up so that I wouldn't forget.
Good. I'm glad you did.
And I'm glad I didn't put it in notes because that would have been really hard to explain. I don't want to kill people anymore with bestiality. And then finally, we end with charges of cannibalism, where Woodstock eats a turkey. Woodstock is a bird.
Right.
For our international audience who may not be familiar with the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving or care enough about Thanksgiving to watch a cartoon about Thanksgiving. So, yeah, but I put all of that forward. I think the misgendering and the misogyny may have some legs in the future.
Maybe.
But everything is going, I mean, our entire culture is based on that. So, yeah, we're only ever going to be problematic in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Sadly.
That's not to take away from charges of racism, because those are real and valid concerns to have and express. And while there may not have been, here I am apologizing for it,
You didn't do it.
Thank you for letting me off the hook that way.
Letting you off the hook.
So where are we at? Who's sorry now? Or
Who's sorry
apology
now,
expected?
Theo? Anyone sorry now?
Do I have one?
If you don't, I have an apology expected.
Why don't you go, and then I'll have one.
Okay, so from the happy cartoon world of Peanuts to the less than happy world of real life, I'm expecting an apology from Merck, the pharmaceutical company, soon, because this past week there were some vials found in one of their labs in Pennsylvania, which was not 10 minutes from where I grew up, and the vials are labeled smallpox.
Oh!
So they're looking now into seeing what the fuck is in these vials. A, what? B, why do you have smallpox in a Merck lab in Pennsylvania? C, they said, oh, it's okay, the people who found it had gloves and masks on. Fuck you, that's not enough. D, were these found in a freezer? Or were they in a -80 freezer or whatever? Or were they in a regular freezer? I don't know. I don't have any answers. All I know is that I read an article saying that there were vials found labeled smallpox in a Merck lab in Pennsylvania, and I'm expecting a big fat fucking apology from Merck, if not the entire state of Pennsylvania.
Entire world. That shit's contagious.
I know, right? Yeah, and the article made it clear to state that there's enough vaccine for everybody in the U.S. if smallpox got out. But I mean, okay, sure, good. I guess we know now that we can vaccinate a lot of people, so that's not so terrifying as it was maybe 10 years ago to think about smallpox getting out. But still, let's have an apology for that, Merck.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if COVID disfigured people the way that smallpox disfigures
Oh
people,
my God.
because if
People
you
would be getting the
survive,
vaccine so fast. Yeah.
you have fucking 5 masks on.
Oh, yeah.
Not you, but I mean,
Oh, yeah. No, I'm
the naughty yous that are running around without masks. I would live inside this tent I've created in this closet for our podcast, and I would
totally
not go
ready
outside.
to lock down forever now that I hear smallpox is out. Because smallpox has been one of my fears, like one of my irrational fears all my life is getting smallpox.
That is a very irrational fear.
Who can explain how the brain works, Theo?
Well, I can. I had a fear of headhunters until I was probably like 30.
You mean like consultant headhunters?
No.
When you're 15 years old, you have nightmares about people with what a job,
cannibals
Theo?
and stuff.
No,
Yeah. So irrational fears. Yeah. Headhunters.
Wow.
Don't know
that
why.
is irrational.
Yeah.
Especially
Well, it's not like I thought they were outside,
I was gonna
my
say, especially in
door.
the southern part of the United States.
It's just why I never went to the Amazon.
Okay.
All those times I was invited to go to the Amazon, and I said,
That's
no.
why I've always wondered.
Headhunters and water tarantulas. No.
Water tarantulas.
Tarantulas
Now
that
I
live in
have
the
a
water and
fear.
can swim,
Yikes.
and they crawl up pipes.
It's why I'm not so sure about going to Australia because of all the deadly things they have there.
Oh,
It seems
fuck.
kind of
Australia
unsafe.
is not fucking around. They want to kill you.
They do. Have you been to Australia?
Yes, a couple of times. And,
Did you die?
Yes. Don't you recognize you're in heaven with me doing a podcast?
This is the best heaven.
Well, it's the only one you're getting. Sorry.
It's like the Mormons. We got several layers of heaven, and on this one, I get to be on a podcast with Theo.
Yay!
Hey,
The ninth circle of heaven.
right.
Yeah, no, Australia's fine.
Podcast circle.
It's a podcast circle. Everyone's got one. Yeah, it's a long way to fly to get to California, in my
Yes.
opinion. Right?
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
American. It's very California. At least the Gold Coast, which is where I went.
Really? Okay.
And the only way I knew it was in Australia was, sorry, this is sad, all of the roadkill kangaroos on the side of the
Holy shit! Wow,
roads.
that would be a
weren't even
surprise.
highways. You get used to it after a while, but you know
Yeah.
how like you'll see a dead deer or a dead,
Yeah,
I
a
don't know,
raccoon, something.
Yeah. possum,
Oh, weird.
armadillo. Let's name all the things.
Javelina.
Javelina?
Yeah. Javelina. You see them in Arizona sometimes.
I don't know what that is. Is
That's
it like a
pig.
little deer?
It's a pig.
No.
You haven't
Never
seen
heard of that.
javelinas in Palm Springs?
No.
What? Oh, go look it up.
No. Okay. I will.
All right, fine.
I watched and then I won't. Anyway, so who's sorry now is what I have, and I'll keep it easy and breezy. I am sorry to my friend Terry. We are not going to his house for Thanksgiving.
No.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. We're just going to have a quiet one here. It would have been a lot of money to go, and I don't want to take the dog, and I don't want to drive. Now,
Right.
could I have gotten in the car 5 days ago and driven? Yes, I could have. Right.
Right.
So could I have done this thing? Yes, I could have. Did I want to? No, I did not want to.
Right.
Why? Not because Terry's not worth it, but because Terry's not worth it.
But you invited him to your house for Thanksgiving, so
Yes,
that's
and I wasn't
totally
worth it.
reasonable. Yeah.
I said no. And so here we are.
there you
And then
are.
we're going for New Year's, and so hooray. But
good.
yeah, so that's my apology. I would love to, but the idea of driving another 2 days there and 2 days back, and then what do I do
And
with
then
the
the
dog?
dog and all that.
'Cause
Yeah.
I have to, the dog's too much work when I'm in somebody else's house. So there you go.
Right.
Anyway, long story.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. I think that's it for today.
That is it. Yes.
So thank you, Theo.
Thank you, not Theo.
And we'll be back next week with another exciting edition of Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
The podcast. Yay.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
You can find links to the articles and the sources in the show notes.
To submit an apology or find out more, visit us at apologiesaccepted.net, where you can also find our merchandise.
We're on Twitter at Apologies Accepted.
And on Instagram at apologies.accepted.
You can support our important work at Patreon.com/Apologies Accepted.
And fuck Facebook.
Bye.
Bye.